Good morning to all. This is Akanksha Shukla from Information Technology Department, and today I am going to discuss about the device based and the screen based controls. What are the different controls that are based on the devices or that are based on the screens? So first of all, I am going to discuss about the device based controls, which are often also known as the input devices, and these device based controls are simply the mechanisms through which the people communicate their desires to the systems or to the users simply communicate their wishes or their desires to the system. So basically these device based controls are used as an interface between the user and the systems. So now I am going to identify the characteristics, or I am going to define the characteristics and the capabilities of the device based controls. So here I am going to discuss about the 8 device based controls. First one is trackball, joysticks, graphic tablets, keyboards, light pen, voice, mouses. The first one is trackball. Basically, the trackball is a device based, or it is an input device which is having a ball that rotates freely in all the directions in its sockets only. And with the use of this kind of input devices, we have direct relationship between the hands and the pointer movements over the, in terms of direction and speed, over the system or over the machines. It does not includes any vision of the screen. It does not requires any additional desk spaces if mounted on the keyboard. And also, just like each and everything has its advantages, then similarly with the having advantages, it has some also disadvantages. So some of the disadvantage of trackball is that the movement is indirect, in plane different from the screens. It requires hand to be removed from the keyboard keys. It requires different hand movements, may be difficult to control sometimes, and it may be fatiguing to use over the extended time. Means if we are using trackball to the some extended time, then it may create the discomforts for the users. The next input device is joystick. Basically, the joystick is also a device which can be used as an interface between the user and the system, and it also has the same advantage just like the trackball. It also provides the direct relationship between the hand and the pointer movement in terms of the direction and the speeds, and also does not obscure any vision of a screen, also does not have additional desk spaces, but it has some speed problem, just like it may be slow and it also can be inaccurate sometimes. So that is only one difference between the trackball and the joystick. The next one is graphic touch tablets. Basically, it is a pressure, highlight or light blockage sensitive horizontal surface that lie on the desktop or that lie on the keyboards. It also has the direct relationship between the hand and the pointer movement in terms of direction and speed, and it is more comfortable horizontal operating plane. Okay, and it has also one disadvantage. These three disadvantages, we can simply see that these three disadvantages are also of trackball and also of joystick. But one different disadvantage which graphic tablets are having is it is finger may be too large for accuracy with the small objects. So for using graphic touch tablets, we have the usage of fingers is more. So sometimes what happens, that finger may be too large for accuracy with the small objects. So sometimes what happens, the things which is not the desire of the users can also be touched or can also be placed by mistake. The next one is touch screens. Similarly, it also does not require any additional desk spaces. It movement is simply direct, and the hand or pointer movement has the direct relationship between these two. And the disadvantage is finger may obscure the part of a screen. Sometimes the fingers may be too large for accuracy with these small objects. It requires moving the hand far from the keyboard to use, and it may also sometimes what happens, it may damage the screens also. When uses for the extended period of time, it also is very fatiguing for the same purpose. The next one is light pen. Basically, it is a special surface on a screen sensitive to the touch of the special stylus. It is a kind of a special pen, and it also has the direct relationship between hand and pointer movements. It also requires the minimal desk spaces. It stands up well in high use environments, and it is more accurate than the finger touching, because what happens that the now we can simply view that the surface of the fingers is more, just like for example this is a pen and this is the finger, then we can easily differentiate that the point of this pen, the point of this pen is more pointed in comparison to this finger. So the surface of this finger can be broad, but the point of this pen is a simple, we can say that it is more pointed. So for weaving or for using some options, just like for suppose I have to touch only this point T. So if I had used this pen, then simply I am able to touch only that particular point. Okay, but comparatively if I am using this finger, then it may be, if I am using this finger, then it may be touching the two alphabets T or O, both. And if I am using this pen, then it is particularly pointing to the specific character or specific thing which I want. So this is the basic difference between finger touching and the using of the pen or light pen. The disadvantage is that it requires picking it to use. Just like a finger, obviously I am carrying in terms of my body also, but if you are using this pen, then I have to carry this one. So it requires picking, and it requires moving the hand far from the keyboard to use, and also for extended period of time it creates the very fatiguing to use. The next one is voice. It is basically the simple automatic speech recognition which is performed by the system or performed by the computer. Advantage is simple, it is simple and direct, and it is useful for the people who cannot use a keyboard, and also useful for the users whose hands are occupied for another things. And the disadvantage is, due to difficulties in recognizing the boundaries between the spoken words and the blurred words boundaries due to the normal speech patterns, it is having the high error rates due to the difficulties for these two things. Slower in comparatively with typing, difficult to use. If we are having a noisy environment, then we cannot be able to easily identify the particular voice which we want to listen. So it is impractical to use in quiet environment. The next one is mouse. I think everyone is familiar with this. It also be able to establish the direct relationship between the hand and the pointer movements. It permits a comfortable and hand resting position. And the disadvantage is that it also requires hand to be removed from the keyboards, and it may require long movement distances. Also requires a degree of eye-hand coordination. The mouse usage guidelines are, it provides a hot zone around the small or the thin objects, and it does not require a person to point at a moving target. Do not require, and do not use the mouse plus keystroke combination. So these are some guidelines while using the mouse. All we have to follow these guidelines. The next one is keyboard, which is also known to all. The familiar, it is accurate, does not take any additional desk spaces, useful for entering the textual information, alphabetical, numeric, or for inserting the text data, and for shortcut accelerators also keyboard can be used, and keyboard mnemonics equivalents also be available. The disadvantage is that slow for non-touch typists, and also slower than other devices in pointing. It requires discrete actions to operate, and does not requires or does not provides any direct relationship between the finger or the hand movement. These are some keyboard guidelines that to provide the keyboard accelerators, to provide the keyboard equivalents. So for keyboard equivalents, we have to use the standard platform equivalents, use the first letter of the item descriptions. Window navigation we have to provide through the use of the keyboard keys, and for the keyboard accelerators, you have to assign shift plus key combinations for the actions that extend or complementary to the actions of the keys, or key combination which are used without the shift keys. Assign the control key combinations for infrequent actions. So these are some keyboard guidelines which we must know before using the keyboard. These are some pointer guidelines. Now move on to the next one, that is screen based controls. So basically screen based controls are also known as the controls, or simply they also called as widgets. By definitions, they are the graphic objects that represents the properties or the operations of the other objects. So operable controls are those controls that can be able to permit the entry, selection, changing, or the auditing or the editing of a particular value, and that can be able to cause a command to be performed. Just like the operable controls are buttons, text entries, read only, selection, combination, entry, selection, and specialized controls. So the first one is buttons. The description is it is a square or the rectangular shaped control which has a label inside it which indicates that the action to be performed. Just like simple, we have a button, the value inside it yes, this is the second button, the value inside it no, and this is the third button, the value inside it is cancel. So if you suppose the question is, do you want to save the changes? So the label, it indicates the actions which is to be accomplished, which is to be performed. So if you want to save the changes, if you click on this button, then it will instantly save the changes. But if you perform this operation, then it will not perform the changes. And if we click on this button, then it will cancel the whole process. So basically the buttons are the controls, and generally we used to provide the labels in such a manner that can be able to indicate the action which is to be accomplished next. So the labels may consist of text or graphics, and it can also be a kind of both. So command buttons, toolbars, the label may be consist of text, graphics, or both, and can be it can be a kind of command button, or it can also be considered as a toolbars. So next one is command buttons. What are the command buttons? Usage and labels. So basically the command buttons are used to provide the fast access to frequently used or critically used commands. Just like for Windows with a menu bar, for use to provide the access to all the necessary commands. Just like for Windows without a menu bar. So it uses the single word labels whenever possible, and also uses 2-3 words for clarity if necessary, not always. It can also use mixed case letters with the first letter of each significant labels capitalized. Do not use the number for the labels. It center the label within the button borders. Just like this is the button, this is the bordering of that button, and the label must be in a centralized manner. It provides the consistency in button labeling across all the screens. Restrict the number of buttons over the screen to 6 or fewer. Fewer means less. It also provides as large as button as feasible and maintain the consistent button heights and width. Also, just like this is a screen, and the button size is like this. So this is not feasible. So it provides as large as button as feasible and maintain the consistency of this button in terms of height and width. The buttons exiting a dialog box and usually closing the windows should be positioned horizontally. Here I am discussing about the location and the layouts of the command buttons. So buttons which exiting a dialog box usually which is used to close the windows, it should be positioned horizontally, or it should be centered across the lower part of the window. Just like this is the window, then the button can be centered across the lower part of the window if you are using that command button for closing the window. Okay, for a button which invokes the dialogues or which are used to expand the dialog boxes, then it can be positioned at the central, and then that can be aligned vertically around the right side of the window. Okay, now it should be aligned to the central position, but it should be aligned vertically and to the right side of the window. So this is also some we can say that this is also some standard manners which we are using for particular purpose for the command buttons. Do not provide alignment with other screen controls. Maintain the alignment or spacing within the button themselves. Position the button within the windows before locate the other window controls. So these are the some guidelines which must be followed in terms of location and layout of the command buttons. Here we can see the location and layout of the command buttons. Here we have exiting buttons, and here we are invoking the features for expanding the dialog buttons. If if in some cases if a button has a contingent relationship to the another control, then position it adjacent to the related controls. Just like in the given example, this button has a relationship to this controls. So what we did, we have to place it adjacent to the related controls. So this is the simple representation of this particular kind of problem. So buttons found on one or more than windows should be consistently positioned in such a way that can be feasible for the user to use. The organization of the command button is more frequent actions can be placed at the left or the top of the windows. The keep related buttons grouped together if there are some buttons, just like in the given example. In the given example, if these three buttons are correlated, okay, just like if we want to save the changes, then we have three options. So these three options are correlated with one another. So that's why these three buttons are placed in a horizontal manner and in a sequential manner, but in a single, we can say that in a single line, it is merged in a single line. Now if instead of this combination you are giving the yes button here, the no button here and the cancel button here, then this is not a feasible way to represent or to give the buttons in this manner. So here only this is, here I am discussing only this, that the related buttons should be grouped together. Okay. Exceptions: the buttons containing the excessively long labels, it may be wider. What is the window recommendations? That affirmative actions should be placed to the left or the above side. The default one should be placed at the first. OK and cancel next to the each other. And at last, what should be provided? The help button should be provided at the last. This is the intent indicator for the command buttons. So no intent indicator is necessary when a button causes an action to be immediately performed. Just like if you want to apply some things to instantly, if you want to apply some changes. So no intent indicator is necessary for this kind of situation. If when a button leads to cascading dialog, then you have to include or it says these things. Okay, means these three dots can be appended when a button leads to cascading dialog. If a button leads to a menu, then it includes a triangle pointing in the direction towards the menu, which is appear after the label, just like this. If button leads to an expanding the dialog more, then include a double arrow, just like this. If a button has a contingent relationship to the another control, then include a single arrow pointing to the control, just like clear, and which options you want to clear is written here. So the arrow button should be directed towards that controls. So the expansions and the defaults of the command buttons are gray buttons. After the when you expand the particular command button, then the color of the button converted into the gray, or when not applicable. Just like we have seen that over the, if we are using the Microsoft Word, then we can easily see that some buttons or some options are in form of gray color, means that are not be able to apply. We are not be able to apply that options currently. So that's why the color of that options are currently gray. When a window is first displayed, it provides a default action if practically you are performing, and the default should be most likely actions, just like confirmation, application of the activity, the position action, the positive action, just like OK, or if a destructive action is performed, the default should be cancelled. So the next one is the indicate the default actions by displaying the button with a bold or double border. So if some actions are performing defaultly, we are not going to define some things especially for that particular actions. The some actions which are indicating the default actions, then that must be in the form of bold or double border. These are some keyboard equivalence accelerators for the command button. Just the mnemonic should be the first character of the button's label. If duplication exists in the first characters, use the another character in the label. Designate the mnemonic character by underlying it. Assign the keyboard accelerator to each button for facilitating the keyboard selections. Scrolling and button activations, what we have to do for command button? For the purpose of scrolling and button activations, then you have to use the buttons to move between the multi-pages forms and not scroll bars, labels, buttons, next and previous. Highlight the button in some visually distinctive manner so that it can be easily viewed by the users. The next one is toolbars. The usage, structure and the size of the toolbars. Next screen-based control is toolbars. So what it provides? It provides easy and fast access to most frequently used commands or options which are using across the multiple screens. And also it provides the buttons of the equal sizes. It creates the meaningful and the unique icons, center the images within the buttons. If we are using some images inside the buttons in form of labels, then it centers the images within the button only. It creates the meaningful label and also provides a smaller size as the default size with the user option to change it. Just like this is a toolbars having the various tools which we are going to perform, just like in the MS Office Word we are having different tools over the toolbars, just like the sizes of the text, the fonts of the text, alignments, so copy, save as options, resizes, crops, and various different kinds of alignments, capitalizations or small letters, different options or different tools are compiled over the particular toolbar screen. So what is the organization and location of toolbars? It places the most frequently used actions to the left of the top, keep related buttons grouped together. This is a standard format for the organization or the location of any kind of screen based control. So we can see that these some points are repeated in command buttons also and in organization and location of toolbars also. Potentially destructive buttons should be separated from the frequently chosen selections. Just like suppose the delete button, there is a delete button. So what we have to do, we have to put that delete button apart from the frequently used actions, because by mistake if one has clicked over the delete button, then what happens? If there is no option to get that particular content after deleting, then what happens? That particular document can be deleted for permanent. So these kind of options should be kept potentially different or separate from the destructive buttons from the frequently chosen selections. It permits the users to reconfigure the button organization. It positions the main features and functions bar horizontally across the top of the window just below the menu bar, and it positions its subtasks and the sub features bars along the sides of the windows also. The location of the bar, what the toolbars permits, it should be changed by the users. It is permittable. It permits the location of the bars to be changed by the user. That permission can be given by the toolbars. What are the active items, button activation and customizations of the toolbars? So it make only currently available tools items which are available, temporarily not available items by displaying the grayed out. Just like I had said before in the command buttons, it highlighted the button in some visually distinctive manner. Call attention to the buttons in another visually distinctive manner, which when activated or pressed, it permits the toolbars to be turned off by the users, and it allows for customizing of the toolbars. The next one is text entry and the read-only controls. So what are the captions for these controls? For entry boxes, we must have to place a colon immediately after following the caption. For single fields, caption can be located in front of the upper left corner of the box, and for the multiple fields, position the caption upper left of the boxes. For read-only boxes, what caption should be followed? If the data field is long or about the same length, then center the caption above the displayed text box. If the data is alphanumeric, then what we have to do? We have to use short or quiet variables in length and left justify the captions above the displayed. If the data field is numerical and variable in length, then right justify the caption above the displayed. So these are some rules or guidelines for captioning these kinds of controls. Now, what are the fields? To visually indicate that it is an enterable field, then present the box in a recessed manner. Present the read-only text boxes on the window background. Break up the long text boxes through the incorporation of slashes, dashes, spaces or common delimiters. Call attention to the text box data through a highlighting technique. Means if you are calling, or if you are going to provide attention for particular text boxes which is performing some specific tasks, then you have to use the highlighting technique for fulfilling the same purpose, and simply gray out the options or the text boxes which are not currently available or which are temporarily unavailable for particular period of time. Next one is selection controls. So under the selection controls we have various options just like radio buttons, check boxes, palettes, list boxes, list view controls, drop down and pop up list boxes. So the radio buttons particularly, it consists of the two-part control. The first one is small circles, diamonds or the rectangles, and the second one is the choices descriptions. So when a choice is selected, that option is highlighted, just like if for example this is a picture, this is a picture and we have various options just like bird, cat, dog, rabbit and pig. So pig is the correct description of that picture. So when we select that option, then that option is, when we select that choice, then that option is highlighted instantly. Any existing choices is automatically unhighlighted and deselected. All the other rested are current. As soon as I had clicked on that radio button, the rest are automatically unhighlighted or deselected. The purpose of radio button is to set one item for a small set of options. From a small set of options, just like we are having a 2 to 8 options, then from that options we have to select only a single item which is most appropriate for that particular selection. For mutually exclusive choices, that is only can be selected, means apart from this selection, rest of the selections are not feasible. Most useful for the data and the choices: data discrete, data small, data not easily remembered, most easily understood when the alternatives are provided or when the alternatives are seen together and compared with one another, never change in content, do not use for the commands. So the defaults and the structures of the radio buttons are: if there is a default selection, then designate it as the default and display it button filled in. Else display all the buttons without setting adopt. When a multiple selection includes choices, then display the buttons in the another unique manner such as gray or gray shadow. Left align the buttons and the choices descriptions and a columnar orientation which is the preferred unless the vertical space on the screen is limited. Enclose the buttons in the order or in the border to visually strengthen the relationship between the different options. What is the organization of the radio buttons and the related controls? So the selection, so if you are having different choices or the options, so arrange the selection in the expected order to follow the other patterns. Position any control which are related to the radio button immediately to the right of the choice descriptions and the label within an arrow. The captions for the radio buttons are: display the full spelled out in mixed case letters, capitalize the first letter of all the significant words, and the orientation must be columnar orientation. With the control border, position the caption. So that's all for the radio buttons. The next, the more or just like I had told that check boxes, palettes, list boxes, menu, drop down list. These screen based controls or these buttons will be compiled or will be completed in my next lecture. That's all for today. Thank you.